Item number 14 is Senate Bill 290 Sub A by Senator Goodwin, an act relating to labor and labor relations, Healthy and Safe Families and Workplaces Act. Senator Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Senate Bill 290 Sub A is known as the Earned Sick Time Act. It's an act that has been much discussed in the state and in this chamber and in our committees. I'd like to begin by pointing out to this chamber that the legislation has significantly changed from its original version. We heard from many stakeholders and addressed several concerns, particularly those coming from our business community. We looked to our neighbors in Massachusetts, and we borrowed terms and language so that we would not be the outliers as the original bill was once viewed. This bill closely tracks the Massachusetts laws and regulations. As it is drafted right here before us, paid sick time only applies to businesses of more than 10 employees, which is about 18% of Rhode Island businesses, but will include more than 80% of Rhode Island workers. Earned paid sick time addresses a very common predicament we all face. People who are met with untimely illness or sudden increased responsibilities of caretaking should not have to decide between going to work ill or staying home and losing income. A recent study showed that for an average household, and that's average household, the loss of 3-day wages is the equivalent to the loss of a full month's food budget. Earned sick time is not meant for long-term temporary care or disability. TDI and TCI are for longer terms and are both funded by employees themselves, not businesses. We've heard that often from the business community, but we know here in this chamber that that claim is not, in fact, true. Earned sick time simply ensures that an individual is able to take a day or two for themselves or a loved one to recover from unexpected short-term ailments. And now I would like to highlight some of the key changes in this legislation. Employees who are already provided paid time off that meets or exceeds the conditions in this bill are not required to do anything differently than they are currently doing now. I would like to also give a shout out to Citizens Bank, who was extremely helpful with this portion of the bill. Some of their folks from HR sat with some of our folks from our policy office and really worked on this language, and I'd like to thank Citizens Bank for their participation. The legislation, as currently written in the Sub A, will apply to businesses with 11 or more employees. However, businesses with 10 or less employees are required to provide unpaid sick time. Covered workers can earn 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours worked. And we also have a rollout provision here, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, so that in year 1, workers will be able to earn up to 4 days of sick time. And in year 2, that will be in 2019, they will be able to earn up to 5. And the 5 days would be capped. Independent contractors, subcontractors, and the city and town employees are exempt from this legislation. Interns and work-study students are entitled to only unpaid sick time. Seasonal and temporary workers have an extended wait period before they're able to earn any sick time at all. We've also cleaned up the definition of family member, but it still allows for some flexibility. The legislation would become effective on January 1st, 2018, with a delay in the enforcement of these until July 1st, 2018. It is worth mentioning that more than 40% of Rhode Island private sector employees do not have sick benefits. I don't think there's hardly anyone here in this chamber that can say the same. I think we're very lucky, ladies and gentlemen. As noted by our own Director of Department of Health, lack of paid sick leave can have a substantial adverse consequence for public health, including the spread of infectious diseases. In fact, during the 2009-2010 H1N1 pandemic alone, an estimated 7 million additional individuals were infected, and there were 1,500 deaths across the United States because contagious employees did not stay home from work to recover. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take this opportunity to many people who helped craft this bill, that we have here today. And this was months and weeks and days worth of work. I'd like to thank Georg Orr Hollister Isman from Working Families, Dr. Marie Ganim. She's mentioned here a lot today because it's well worth noting. Katusa Perez from our policy office, and representatives from the business community for their input. Although not fully supportive, they came to the table, the business community, and we sought to address many of their concerns. I would also like to thank the hundreds of Rhode Islanders who called and, yes, emailed their thoughts and opinions on, on this particular issue. I'd like to also give a shout out and thank Mr. Kevin Durfee, the owner of Georges of Galilee, in particular for his email, as it really enlightened this issue, not only here in the state, but across the country, I might add. Because of the reporting of Catherine Gregg and Matt O'Brien here, this issue was picked up by dozens and dozens of news outlets across the United States, even reaching England. So I'm hoping that maybe some legislators over there, maybe or across the United States that don't have earned sick time might get a good idea and maybe model what we're doing, hopefully doing here in the state of Rhode Island. So let me just say, lastly, ladies and gentlemen, with all the work and all the discussion, I think it really comes down to a simple choice, whether or not we in this chamber feel that Rhode Island workers deserve to be able to earn a few paid sick days. You know, I'll just end by saying economic opportunity is a two-way street. And we've done a lot for businesses, I think, in this state over the years. I really do. Businesses need workers, and workers really should have the right to have a few days to be sick or take care of their loved ones. Mr. President, it's an excellent piece of legislation. I move passage.
Thank you, Senator Goodwin, I think. Is there a second? Second by Senator McCaffrey, Senator Lynch-Prada, Senator Connolly, Senator Miller, Senator Chacon, Senator Jabor, Senator Lombardi, Senator Nesselbush, Senator Crowley, Senator Casada, Senator Pearson, Senator Metz, Senator Archambault, Senator Satchel, Senator Coyne, Senator Corkin, Senator Golden, Senator Seveny, and Senator DePalma. Discussion on the act. Senator Corkin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to first thank Senator Goodwin for her leadership on this effort. I rise in strong support. No one should have to decide between going to work and paying their rent or taking care of a sick child. We also know that one of the benefits of this, workers will not get their coworkers or customers sick. 7 states and DC have passed similar legislation to this, including Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont. They report higher productivity with little to no increase in costs. More than 80% of voters across the country support the ability to earn sick time. I'm honored to support this legislation that will help so many working families. Thank you.
Yes, I do, Mr. President.
Would you like to offer that amendment at this time?
Thank you for the reminder. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I have an amendment that you all should have, and it just makes technical changes to the legislation, nothing substantial. And I move its passage. The
LC code is LC 001160/2. And Senator Goodwin moves passage of the amendment. Is there a second? Second by Senator McCaffrey, Senator Corkin, Senator Palmer, Senator Lombardi, Senator Nesselbush, and Senator Casada. Is there discussion on the amendment? Senator Golden, your light is lit. Discussion on the amendment? Senator Casada, your light is lit. Is there discussion on the amendment?
No.
On the amendment, Senator Picard?
Mr. President, out of abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote and the bill.
Senator Picard is recusing himself from this vote. It'll be so noted. On the amendment, any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all senators registered their vote? The clerk will lock the machine. There are 35 votes in the affirmative, none in the negative, and 1 recusal, and the amendment passes. On the act as amended, is there discussion on the act as amended? Senator Aptakis.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. Will the sponsor or the floor manager yield to a question?
Will the sponsor yield to a question? Senator Goodwin.
Certainly.
Senator Goodwin, on the breakdown, how do we get to 11? And I'm also wondering, did we go around and go to these small businesses, say of 11 folks, 15 employees, and get some kind of fiscal note what it's going to cost the business? Because I'm worried about the small business, not worried about the large big box stores.
Senator, no, we didn't go around to businesses taking a survey. Maybe we should start with yours. How many do you employ, Senator? No, I want to be polite in the debate here. We chose 11 because that raises the exemptions to 65% of the businesses here in Rhode Island.
Well, I own a family business for 38 years, Senator.
I know.
And I have about 4 part-time employees. And I'm trying to survive in this state. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my support is not for big box stores, Walmart, Kmart, McDonald's, Burger King. They probably can afford sick time and they probably provide it. I'm afraid what we're doing here is to small business. I've spoken to many of the small businesses in my community, whether it's an oil burner company, restaurants, laundromats, whatever it is, small mom and pop's business that make up the burden of employment in this state. There's 32,000 small businesses in this state. When I sat down with one employer, he says, I give my employees 3 weeks of vacation time. But with this legislation, it's going to force me to eliminate that because now I have a cost involved. And the cost is very important because if we don't know what it's going to cost a small business, what are we doing? I like to ask if anyone went in their district and sat down in the kitchens of some of these restaurants or bakeries or whatever case might be and look those owners in the eye and tell them that I'm mandating 5 days of paid sick time. Anybody ask the cost again? And at the same time, we're also putting more pressure by even expanding this to part-time employees. Now, what's the definition of a part-time employee? Is it 5 hours? I'm not sure if anybody can answer that question. 5, 10 hours a week? So if it's over 11, that means even the part-time employee that walks through that door and works 7, 10 hours a week by the end of the year is going to have paid sick time. And I think that's a very dangerous precedent in the state. When I look at the bill on page 10, line 1, where the state mandates to keep records for 3 years, well, a lot of these companies don't have human resources officers or employees. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we really got to look at this, protect the small business, the small mom and pop stores in this state. Mr. President, this time I have a floor amendment, LC 001160/3. And I offer that amendment. And what the amendment does on page 3, line 16, by deleting the language 11 and by inserting in place thereafter the language 50.
Senator Aptakis offers an amendment. He's already given the LC code. Is there a second to Senator Aptakis' amendment? Second by Senator Kettle. Discussion on the Senator Aptakis' amendment. Senator Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I want to speak specifically to Senator Reptakis' amendment, but I just wanted to say, Senator Reptakis, I know that you're a small business owner. I know that you do a good job at your business. I'm not trying to be flip, but the box companies that we're not trying to get of that you spoke of, yes, it's true. In DLT records, we have about 33,000 small businesses here. But in the terms used by DLT, they're firms, they're considered firms. And in those firms are McDonald's, the Walmarts, but they're considered one business, adding up into those 33,000 businesses here in Rhode Island. They're not all small mom and pop businesses. And Senator Reptakis, what you spoke of, going to visit the kitchens and the bakeries, of small businesses and the hardships, those are the very workers we're trying to protect. Those are the workers we don't want going into work having to make that choice with stomach bugs or anything else. And to the 50 number in Senator Reptakis' amendment, I'm going to urge my colleagues to defeat this amendment by adding 50, by adding the number from 11 to 50 decimates the intent of the bill. Senator Reptakis knows that, and we do too. So I move to reject Senator Reptakis' amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Goodwin. Senator Golden on Senator Reptakis' amendment.
Thank you. I also stand in opposition of this amendment. I think there are two important points to make here. If we raise the level of business threshold to 50, we will eliminate almost 75%, I believe, are the estimates of the people we are trying to get sick time. And that is makes this barely worth passing. But the other thing is we often hear from the business community that they don't want things that are different across state lines. The bill that Senator Goodwin has put in with a threshold of 11 is exactly what Massachusetts has. And that's where the 11 comes from. So we are merely trying to make things equal with Massachusetts in creating this 11 threshold. And that is why I ask people to vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Golden. Senator Corcoran.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in strong opposition to this amendment. I've actually spoken to quite a few small companies, and those that value the health of their employees and their employees' children are in favor of this bill. When we talk about keeping track, everyone knows how to use Excel. It's not that difficult. And I just want everyone to think about what this bill means. If we say no to this, we're saying no to those people that make the least amount of money and have the least amount of benefits and help in this world, and we're telling them that they're not valued enough to earn a sick day. And we should all be helping these people, not voting against them, and letting them earn sick days. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Corcoran. Senator Quesada.
I rise in opposition of the amendment. I believe we have the responsibility to take care of small business. That's true. But at the same time, we have the responsibility to take care of workers in Rhode Island. And I think everybody deserves to have a sick day. When you have a kid that's sick and you are not able to go to work, then I really agree with all my colleagues. We should go vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Quesada. Senator Lombardi.
Thank you, Mr. President. And it's sometimes politics make strange bedfellows. It's usually not often that I would follow Senators Golden, Senator Corcoran, and Senator Quesada and rise in opposition to Senator Reptakis' amendment. But I do so for two reasons. First, I serve on the Labor Committee under the watchful eye of Chairman Fogarty, and I can't tell you how much this bill has been carved and narrowed down to allow for some semblance of respect to some small population of the Rhode Island working community. And we're talking about 4 sick days the first year and 5 sick days the next. When this bill was originally brought forward by the whip, and she doesn't need my defense, but when she brought this forward, it applied to all employers, and it had much less exceptions in it than it did before. So I enthusiastically signed on to this bill because you know what? I'm one of those employers that have under 11. And guess what? I voluntarily give my employees sick time. I do that. Whether it's 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, they happen to be sick. And you know, my good friend Senator Jabor reminded me of something. I'd like to see the employers who believe the employees are out there at the beach using this kind of sick time to their advantage and not truly using it, all whopping 4 days of it in the first year and not the 5th day. But I also rise in direct opposition to Senator Raptakis' amendment for one very simple reason. He's made it 50 employees. We have now triggered with 50 employees all sorts of federal laws and the applicability of federal law as they relate to those employers, including, among other things, fair labor standards, FMLA, sick time. All of those issues are triggered by federal law, and there are protections ironically, there are protections for employees far better than the protections in this bill for employees of employers with over 50. So I ask you to reject this amendment and to reward Whip Goodwin for the hard work she's done in putting this bill, a compromise bill, before this floor.
Thank you, Senator Lombardi. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, the clerk will please unlock the machine. Have all senators registered their vote? The clerk will lock the machine. There are 3 votes in the affirmative, 32 in the negative, and 1 recusal. The amendment fails. On the act as amended, Senator DuPont.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, I too have a small amendment, which the LC code is LC 001160/4. Before I explain the amendment, I just want to rise and actually commend the whip for this legislation. While we all know that we have many very genuine and wonderful employers in this state, we also know that there are those who are not. But I also recognize that we have taken, as the whip stated, many steps to improve the business climate in the state of Rhode Island, from tax policy to trying to reduce the regulatory burden. But this, in fact, while it's done, well, this bill, the proposed bill, is law in several other states, it is, in fact, something new for us in Rhode Island. So my amendment simply alters the definition of employee to full-time and nothing else. I think it's a prudent step if this law first applies to full-time employees, and if it's not as big of a burden as we've been written to and discussed that it will be, then I think we can certainly consider favorably adding part-time employees as well. With that, I move passage.
Senator DuPont moves the amendment. Is there a second? Second by Senator Raptakis. Is there discussion on Senator DuPont's amendment? Senator Kettle.
On the act, sorry.
Senator Corkin on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I oppose this amendment as well. Part-time employees would only be receiving their earned sick time on the hours that they work. So I believe that they should be as valued as any other employee. When we talk about the people who work part-time jobs, usually they're working another full-time job as well. So again, I just feel that we shouldn't be singling out employees, and this benefit should be allowed for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Corkin. Senator Golden on the amendment.
Thank you. I also stand in strong opposition of excluding part-time workers from this bill. As Senator Corkin mentioned, this is not, it's an hour-by-hour equivalent that you're earning. It doesn't mean that you are going to earn the same amount of time as a full-time worker. It just means you have an equitable amount of time. But I think it's very important to note that in Rhode Island, only 29% of part-time workers have access to paid sick time now. And what we are doing is saying that we want to continue, if we want to continue that situation, we are keeping those people in poverty and more likely that they're going to end up in the hospitals and have incredible stress on our healthcare system, which drives up costs for all of us. So again, I oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Golden. Senator Goodwin.
Mr. President, just briefly, I rise to urge my colleagues to defeat Senator DuPont's amendment at this time for two reasons in particular, other than the reasons that Senator Golden and Senator Corcoran stated. First of all, part-time workers in this piece of legislation accrue at a slower pace. So some part-time workers may never even receive the full benefit as stated here. And secondly, I'd like to also point out that Massachusetts or Connecticut, I don't believe any other legislation in the country exempt part-time workers. These are also some of the folks we are trying to help. So I move to defeat Senator DuPont's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Goodwin. Senator Quesada.
I stand up and I completely disagree with you, Mr. Carly Despond. Thank you, Senator President. I believe if you get sick, no matter if you work a full-time or a part-time job, that don't have nothing to do. If you are sick, you're sick. Then I think everybody should get it, no matter if you work a part-time job or a full-time job. Everybody in Rhode Island should have the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Quesada. Senator Metz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President and ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. I just want to point out one thing. As a teacher, we've always seen how parents can't afford to take a day out of work and they send their kids to school sick. That's one thing. And the parents, a lot of the parents that we know, you call them part-time, they're working two part-time jobs, 80 hours a week. 40 hours a week. They may work 20 hours here, 20 hours there. So maybe it's different places, but they're part-time, full-time workers. Don't lose sight of that. And we've seen over the years the trend. I started out as a per diem substitute. Did it for years. Only reason why I could do it was because my wife was a full-time teacher. And so the family had benefits and everything. And if I got to a certain number of days, I think it was 128, they would have to pay me retroactive. And not bragging, I was a pretty good teacher. So they would always call me to do this substitute. And I would come in, but guess what? As soon as I got to 100 days, I got no more phone calls. Why? Because the benefits would have kicked in. And then finally, the teachers union put a stop to it, and they said, stop taking advantage of those long-term subs. Now, I could have retired years ago. I think I did that like for 8 years, 5 to 8 years. I can't remember now. And I retired with 31. I would have had like 40-something years in the pension system. So the point I'm trying to make is, and we saw the trend in industry going back years ago. What did they do? You talk about the big corporations. What did they do? They stopped hiring people for 40 hours a week. They stopped that, and they started hiring part-time people so they couldn't pay the benefits. So let's keep things in proper perspective. A lot of these parents, you call them part-time, they're struggling, can't pay the rent, don't know how they're going to feed their kids. I see them at the food pantry on Fridays, people that are working, trying to make ends meet. And they're working 2 part-time jobs, not just what you call part-time workers. No, they're full-time workers. They just happen to work 20 hours here, 20 hours there or more. So let's keep this in the proper perspective. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Metz. Senator Satchel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Metz kind of stole my thunder. I was going to talk about how there are a lot of people that work multiple part-time jobs, and me, myself, as an educator, Senator Aptakis asked if we had gone and sat in people's kitchens and talked to these people about it. I have. I've talked to businesses about it. They're not happy. But I've also been the one running to grab the trash can and holding it while a kid's puking in class because their parent couldn't take the day out of work to stay home with them. I've also sat there and listened to sniffles turn into a little kid breathing like Darth Vader because their parents couldn't take them to go get antibiotics and a respiratory infection developed. So I understand where Senator DuPont is coming from, but like Senator Metz said, this could prevent workers from getting full-time status. This could knock people from full-time status down to part-time status. And please think about the kids too. I mean, this is as much about the kids as it is about the workers and the employers. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Satchel. The amendment is before us. There is no further speakers. Will the amendment prevail? The clerk will unlock the machine. Have all senators registered their vote on the amendment? The clerk will please lock the machine. There are 6 votes in the affirmative, 29 in the negative, 1 recusal. The amendment fails. On the act as amended, Senator Kettle.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to this bill. Respectfully, I disagree with my colleague. While I understand and appreciate the intent of this legislation, my opposition lies with the state's consistently dismal business climate that we have. Rhode Island has ranked near the bottom in several rankings recently. We have done a lot in recent years to help out small business. I do work for a small family business, and no, we do not get sick time. But whether it is raising the minimum wage or legislation like this, I think we do more in this building to stifle small business than we do to help it. Several years ago, the Senate, in order to improve our state's business climate, we had an initiative called Moving the Needle. We're still near the bottom, and frankly, I think this bill moves the needle the other way. I have talked to some of the small business owners in my district. One of them is the owner of Richard's Oil Company. And he would be covered under this bill. He employs 11 people during the winter season, and he would be covered. And when I talked to him, because businesses, they only have so much money for pay and benefits. They have a budget, and they need to meet that budget. Otherwise, they close. He told me, well, next year I'm only going to have 10. So are we going to take away an opportunity for that 11th and 12th employee or more for them to be able to earn a little money, all right, and be productive? So I respectfully oppose this legislation. While I think the whip has tried to address the concerns of the business community, I still think we have a ways to go. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Whip Kettle. Senator Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, too, rise in opposition of this bill. With the good intentions that it does have, I've spoken to many businesses in the area. They just can't do it, and they will lower the employee numbers to accommodate the bill, which the unemployment rates will rise. You're going to cut people out of employment because they are going to cut down on the employees. We want to attract businesses to Rhode Island. This is not attracting businesses to Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morgan. Senator Golden.
Thank you. I rise in strong support of this bill, and I want to recognize Senator Goodwin's incredible advocacy in getting this bill to the floor today. It required many discussions and compromises and finding a way that she could thread the needle if that something would be good for business as well as workers and our economy. As I mentioned before, when we have sick days, when we don't have sick days, that's a direct hit to our healthcare sector. We're all paying for it by not having paid sick days. Every time somebody has to go to the emergency room because they're afraid of losing their job, or as Senator Goodwin mentioned, are afraid that they're just not going to be able to have enough food on the table that month because they can't make ends meet with missing a couple of days of work. That is that's a hit to us, and it's a hit to our economy. You know, our grocery stores suffer when people can't afford to buy food too. So this is something that I think really meets all of those needs. I think it's critically important to know that this may seem like a luxury to the people in this building, not a luxury to the people in this building, but something that you've had for most of your careers. And that's because the majority of high-wage earners do have some sort of paid time off and paid sick days, but low-wage workers don't. And this will make a significant difference for families who are living on the edge so that they don't have to make the decision about going to work with the flu or staying home, taking care of themselves, and getting better quicker. So I want to thank Senator Goodwin again, and I also want to thank the many advocates, and particularly Kate Roberts, who owns Easy Entertaining. She's a restaurant owner who lives in my district, who was one of the first business owners who came forward and said how incredibly important she thought this bill was, and how as a restaurant owner, she has always provided sick time because she thinks it's an investment in her workforce. And she wants to make sure that her employees stay well and her customers stay well because they don't catch things from their employees while they're handling the food. So thank you again, and I urge my colleagues to vote in support of this bill.
Thank you, Senator Golden. Senator Aptakis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise in opposition to this bill. We've heard a lot this afternoon, and from some of the debate, you hear that a lot of businesses are making this a volunteer program. So why do we need this bill? If a lot of businesses are making this voluntarily, they're giving their employees sick time, why do we need this bill? What's next? Are we going to come back here next year? And we heard the stories that individuals are ill, they need the time off. Are we going to mandate health insurance for all businesses in Rhode Island as a mandate? Is that going to be next? I think what we're doing today, especially our small community businesses in our hometowns, is a disservice. We're slapping them in the face. We're calling them mean-spirited because they don't accept giving sick time off. As ladies and gentlemen, throughout this afternoon, we keep hearing about what Connecticut's doing, what Massachusetts is doing. When are we going to take the lead and craft our own legislation? Because I'm sick and tired of hearing, well, Connecticut did this, Mass did that. Well, Massachusetts is ranked 23rd in the business climate. We keep going and making it worse for us. We're going to be at 50th, and we're going to stay 50th. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Aptakis. Senator Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Most people know I speak on very few bills other than my own, and this is the first one this year that I spoke on. I think last year the only one I spoke on was roadworks, but I feel compelled to speak on this. We talk about, and I will not speak to any of my colleagues specifically, but the comments are appropriate. I've worked like others in a major corporation. I'll start my 35th year at the company I'm at on September 1st. And as others have mentioned, I do benefit from paid time off and paid sick days. It's all grouped together, and I have had that for the 34 years that almost I've been there. So I do benefit from that, and there are many, 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 many folks in the state of Rhode Island that do not. We can't look at this from, I'm going to make 2 points. We can't look at this from the perspective of what we do today and opening the can of worms or what we'll do tomorrow. That's another discussion for another day. We have to look at the issue we have in front of us, and the issue in front of us is paid sick time, paid time off for all the events and all the work that the items that the whip had mentioned. I give the whip a lot of credit for all the work and the trials and tribulations. I've only followed this from on the periphery, but the collaboration and the bill we have before us, I think, is a very good bill. No bill is perfect. We can't let better be the enemy of good enough, and I think we have a very good bill in front of us. The last piece I want to mention is this. I've hired a whole bunch of folks over my years at the company I work at, and I've worked with a whole bunch of folks that have been hired at the company. I used to manage a group of about 225 folks for a number of years. And I've always said, you can give me the best technology, you can give me the best tools, you can give me the best processes and mediocre people, And I'm going to take mediocre processes, mediocre tools, mediocre technology, and what I want the best people. Why do I say that? You can say, what do you mean by all that? If Connecticut has it and Massachusetts has it, guess where I'm going to work? Connecticut or Massachusetts. It's one of the things that people look at when they're looking to move to the Northeast. They're looking to move in the Northeast because we're pretty close. We can circumnavigate, not the globe, but Narragansett Bay in about 45, 50 minutes. People can move pretty quickly, either by rail or by car. This will put us on par. It's the right thing to do. The workers in Rhode Island need it, and it's about time we do it.
Thank you, Senator De Palma. Senator Metz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. I rise to support this legislation, and certainly, based on who I represent, I always struggle every year around this time because on some things I may be considered liberal, other things I may be considered conservative. But one thing I always try to do is I try to have a balance. I am not anti-business. And I say that because to move up like some of the other states that was mentioned, well, we know a lot of those states, they call it the right to work. They want to eliminate unions. You know, let's get real about it. Let's tell it like it is, so that they can have low wages. But one of the things I used to ask my students, I used to ask them, I said, has slavery ended? And they would look at me. And I said, no, if you don't, and my point was I was always trying to stress the importance of education. If you don't get the education, well, you're going to be an economic slave. And there is economic slavery. My wife and I, we volunteer at the Camp Street Community Ministries on every Friday, just for about from 9:30 to about 1:30, a few hours a week. And I see people that I know are working some part-time jobs, but guess what? They're coming up there to get some food, and I'm talking about not just black people. These are some Russian Jews that live in the neighborhood, some Russian Jews, some people from all backgrounds, some Spanish people, some black people, some white people. These are people working, trying to make a living, trying to make ends meet, don't know how they're going to pay their rent. So, if anything, I think what this bill is doing, it's going to help minimize the economic slavery that people are trapped in that can't get out. Because once you're in poverty, you're trapped in it. You can't get out of it, no matter how hard you try. So I think what Senator Goodwin, and matter of fact, I believe what Senator Goodwin did was to bring balance to the system. We want a healthy business climate, yet, as my good friend Senator Nestor Bush says, we want to look out for the least of society. And that's the balance that we strive for year in and year out. So I commend all the stakeholders that got together and they came up with a compromise legislation. But I think when it's all said and done, this is the balance that we're looking for, and it was a good compromise because I don't think people are too happy about it, but the people that really need it will be happy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Metz. Senator Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me. I live in a community that 90% of the community is a business. They're a small business. They're a restaurant. And most of them would employ less than 10 people. But those that might employ a few more, all right, I know if I go into that restaurant and I see this one coughing and spitting over my food, I certainly am not going to want it, okay? And that's going to make me sicker just looking at it, never mind. So we're protecting not only the worker, we're protecting the customer, all right? I know several people that work in nursing homes. Many of them work for minimum wage. Many of them do not get paid sick time. Or if they do, from time to time it is changed. Oh yeah, you can't take sick day today because you didn't do that. Well, I didn't know I was going to be sick today. you have to give an advance now to collect sick time. We're talking about 4 days. And I'm sure, as an employee, you're going to think about how you're going to use those 4 days. Oh, I can't because I don't know if my little Johnny's going to be sick next week. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I worked 40 years for municipal government. Okay, and I was very blessed. I had sick days. Okay, and I had a union to help me protect those sick days. But the cravat is, when do you take those sick days? You don't use them like a vacation day. You're allowed to accumulate so many, and thankfully, when I had kidney cancer and had to be out 6 months, I could use those sick days. But, and yeah, there's 1 or 2 people that might take advantage of having a sick day, you know, when they're really not sick. But 99% of the people use it when they're sick. And that's why I stand in favor of this legislation.
Thank you, Senator Crowley. Senator Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. My daughter lives in Maine, in Booth Bay Harbor, and they implemented this sick leave bill. Her significant other is a very well-to-do architect. He had 2 weeks vacation. What they've done now is they've cut down his 1 week vacation and 5 sick days. So businesses are going to try to find a way to lessen their employees. And it's not a business-friendly bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morgan. Senator Quesada.
I rise in support of this bill. I have many small businesses in my district, and I understand the pain. But at the same time, I have many family in my district who will benefit from this bill. Then I really want to say congratulations to Senator Goodwin to put this together, and I ask all our colleagues to please to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Quesada. Senator Miller.
Yes, I want to address some of the comments. You know, I'm a restaurant owner. Senator Reptakis is a restaurant owner. There are restaurant owners that are passionately supportive of this bill, and there are restaurant owners that are seriously concerned about this bill. But I want to clarify some things in a real-time scenario that we're required to do as restaurateurs. If you knowingly allow a sick employee to work, you are violating health code. And so you immediately, if you are aware they are ill, are required to dismiss them. Now, I want to get back to one thing before I go down this list. You gave me a great idea for legislation next year. It's to mandate that every Rhode Islander has health insurance. So thanks for the idea on that. But let me get to my list on things that we are obligated to do as restaurant owners. We have to recognize, if possible, who is sick and dismiss them. Our primary concern is employee and customer safety. And I am not proud to say that the restaurant industry model does not always go for high-wage workers. And so many of our workers are low-wage workers. And many of them depend on that income as a part-time job. And that part-time job is very important to them as somebody who's a student teacher, somebody who is, I'm thinking of some of my employees. Some of them are student teachers, some of them who are students, some of them are in training, some of them are interning somewhere else. Some of them who don't have part-time jobs elsewhere are working 2, 3 jobs. And they make up hours, sometimes 20, 30, 40 hours as a second job working in this industry. And they may not tell you that they are sick because they feel at risk for not working, that they need that money. And if you are able to tell that employee that you are able to give them that sick pay, you are going to make your fellow employees and your customers safer and keep them fed at the same time, if that's the situation they're in, because of a temporary or permanent situation that they are in. And I just want to point out a few things that Senator Reptakis said that every restaurateur should know. that we, at one of my businesses, went through a federal labor audit, and that auditor made it clear to me that every restaurant in the state of Rhode Island is going to go through that same federal audit. And they are required, and it's going to be a lot easier to get through that audit, to have 3 years of your payroll records available to them within about 24 hours. So the burden he talked about is a burden that he better maintain, because that's an important obligation that he may someday be up to. It's also a burden to maintain all your tax records, including your payroll records, in case of a federal or a state audit. And so all those records are requisite already. And so I think it's very important for every restaurant owner to know that our ultimate responsibility is to employee and customer health and safety, and this bill helps in that. And there have been a series of compromises based on specifically addressing the concerns of our industry. The sponsor started at 7 days, ended up at 4 and 5 days. Started at 90 days for seasonal workers, ended up at 120 days. Those are a few of the exceptions that were improved upon on behalf of our industry. Not everybody's happy, but I think in the long run, compromise made a legislation that many restaurant owners who are concerned about safety are very pleased with. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 290 Sub A as amended? Hearing none, the clerk will please unlock the machine. Have all senators registered their vote? The clerk will lock the machine. There are 27 votes in the affirmative, 8 in the negative, and 1 recusal, and the act as amended passes.